When Lakota warriors took her, their silent prince whispered, "You're safe now." The morning sun rose slowly over the quiet settlement, casting long golden shadows across the wooden cabins and dusty roads. Birds chirped in the distance, and the soft breeze carried the faint smell of smoke from the chimneys. Clara, a young woman of 17, moved carefully around the yard, carrying a bucket of water from the well. Her small homestead sat on the edge of the prairie, far from the nearest town, and life had always been simple here. Clara was used to chores, to the rhythm of the land, to the quiet hum of everyday life. But that morning, the calm would shatter in ways she could never have imagined. Clara's mother had sent her to fetch water before sunrise. The wooden bucket felt heavy in her hands, and the chill of the morning air made her shiver. She glanced toward the horizon, where the sky was painted in shades of pink and orange, and she felt a strange sense of unease. Something in the air was different, subtle, almost invisible, but enough to make her pause and look around. She shook her head, trying to dismiss the feeling. After all, the prairie was often quiet, and Clara had learned to live with the vast emptiness around her. As she made her way back to the cabin, she noticed a faint sound in the distance, like the soft pounding of hooves. At first she thought it was the wind, or perhaps a group of travelers passing through. But then the sound grew louder, more deliberate, and Clara's heart began to beat faster. She set the bucket down and squinted toward the horizon. Dust was rising in the distance, and shapes began to take form, figures on horseback, moving quickly across the open land. Fear tightened in Clara's chest. She had heard stories from travelers and neighbors about raiders and warriors who sometimes crossed the plains, but she had never imagined seeing them herself. Her first instinct was to run toward the cabin, to warn her family, but her feet felt heavy and her mind raced. The figures on horseback were getting closer, their numbers growing by the second. Clara realized with a sinking heart that there was no time to think, only to act. She ran toward the cabin, shouting for her mother and father. Her voice echoed across the empty fields, but it seemed to vanish into the wind. Inside the cabin, her parents were startled by her sudden entrance. Her mother dropped a loaf of bread, and her father grabbed a rifle that had been resting against the wall. Clara's father's eyes widened when he saw the dust rising in the distance and the sound of hooves growing louder. "They're coming," Clara said, her voice trembling. "Hurry." Before anyone could react further, the raiders arrived. They were a group of Lakota warriors, moving with precision and strength across the prairie. Their horses were strong and fast, their movements coordinated and purposeful. Clara froze as they dismounted, their eyes scanning the settlement with a mix of caution and authority. She had never seen people like this so close, dressed in leather and beads, with feathers in their hair that swayed with each movement. There was an intensity in their gaze that both frightened and fascinated her. Chaos erupted almost immediately. The warriors moved quickly, taking control of the settlement before anyone could resist. Families shouted warnings to one another. Children cried, and the sound of breaking wood filled the air as cabins were overturned. Clara's father tried to protect their home, raising his rifle, but he was quickly restrained. Clara clung to her mother, her small frame trembling as one of the warriors approached them. Amid the fear and noise, Clara noticed a young man who stood apart from the others. He did not shout, he did not strike, and he did not participate in the chaos. Instead, he simply watched. His eyes were calm, steady, and focused, as if he were observing the world with a quiet understanding that others lacked. Clara could not take her eyes off him. There was something different about him, something that made her feel a small flicker of hope in the midst of terror. The warriors rounded up the settlers, separating men from women and children. Clara found herself being led away from her home, her parents' faces blurred by tears and dust. She tried to speak, to ask where they were taking her, but no words came out. The young warrior she had noticed stayed close, walking silently beside her. Though he did not speak, his presence was comforting in a strange way. The journey across the prairie was long and exhausting. Clara's feet ached from running, and the sun beat down mercilessly on her shoulders. She stumbled several times, but the young warrior steadied her without a word, placing a hand lightly on her arm. Each time he did, she felt a sense of safety, as if he were silently promising that he would not let anything happen to her. At night, they stopped by a small river. The other warriors made camp, but the young man remained near Clara, keeping watch. She noticed the way he moved with care, never startling her, never making sudden gestures. When she finally found the courage to speak, her voice was barely audible. "Why are you helping me?" she asked, her words trembling. He did not answer with words. Instead, he simply nodded toward the river, indicating that she should drink and rest. Clara understood the gesture and obeyed, her trust in him growing despite the fear that still lingered in her heart. As they continued their journey the next day, Clara began to notice small details that set the young warrior apart from the others. He did not take pleasure in the suffering around him, he did not laugh at the fear of others, and he never raised his voice. His eyes followed her carefully, ensuring she was safe, even as the other warriors moved with force and purpose. Clara's fear began to mingle with curiosity. Who was this silent prince among the warriors? Why had he chosen to protect her when others did not? The landscape of the prairie stretched endlessly before them, golden grass swaying in the wind, dotted with distant trees and hills. Clara had never felt so small, so exposed, yet the young warrior's presence gave her a strange sense of belonging. She realized that, despite the terror of the raid, she was not entirely alone. By the end of the day, they reached a ridge overlooking a vast expanse of land. The settlement was now a distant memory, smoke rising faintly in the background. Clara's heart ached for her family, but she also felt a growing bond with the silent warrior beside her. He did not speak, but when he looked at her, she understood that he was promising something beyond words, a promise of protection, of safety, at least as long as he could keep it. That night, as they camped under the stars, Clara could not sleep. She thought of her home, her parents, and the life that had been abruptly torn away. Yet she also thought of the quiet warrior, of the calm in his eyes, and the unspoken reassurance he had given her. The prairie was wide and wild, the night full of unknown dangers, but for the first time since the raid, Clara felt a small flicker of hope. She did not know what lay ahead, nor did she understand the full intentions of the warriors who had captured her. But she knew one thing: she was not entirely alone, and perhaps with this silent protector by her side, she could survive the journey to come. As the stars twinkled overhead and the fire crackled softly, Clara whispered a silent prayer for courage. Somewhere nearby, the young warrior kept watch, his eyes scanning the darkness, unwavering, and in that moment Clara realized that even in the midst of fear and uncertainty, safety and trust could exist in the most unexpected of places. The morning sun rose again over the endless prairie, but this time Clara did not feel the same calm as before. The night had been long, filled with strange noises. The whisper of the wind through the grass, the occasional cry of a distant animal, and the soft shuffle of horse hooves. She awoke to find the young warrior still near her, sitting quietly by the fire. His dark eyes scanned the horizon, alert and steady, as if he could sense danger before it arrived. Clara watched him, feeling a mix of fear and admiration. Even in silence, he seemed to carry strength and knowledge that comforted her. The other warriors were already moving, preparing their horses for the day's journey. Clara's heart sank as she realized they were traveling deeper into the open plains, far from any settlement or familiar land. She had no idea where they were going or how long the journey would last. Every step forward felt heavy, each mile a reminder of her separation from her family. Yet the presence of the silent warrior gave her a small sense of security. She was not entirely alone, and that mattered more than she could put into words. As they moved, Clara noticed how different the young warrior was from the others. While most of the riders shouted and laughed, showing off their skills or boasting about their strength, he remained calm, almost invisible. He rode slightly behind her, his eyes never leaving her, making sure she kept up. Whenever the terrain became rough, he would subtly adjust her path, guiding her through uneven ground or around obstacles. Clara realized that he was protecting her in ways she had not even understood before. She began to rely on him not just for physical safety, but for emotional support in a world that now seemed frightening and unknown. The prairie stretched endlessly, golden waves of grass rolling into the distance. Birds took flight as the horses passed, and the air was filled with the faint scent of earth and grass. Clara had always loved the open land near her home, but now it felt different. Wild, untamed, and dangerous. Every sound, every shadow, made her heart race. She clutched the small satchel of belongings she had managed to bring with her, feeling its weight as a reminder of what she had lost. But at the same time, she could not ignore the curiosity growing inside her. She wanted to understand the people she was traveling with, to see why this young warrior had chosen to show her kindness when others had not. By midday, they reached a small grove of trees where the warriors decided to rest. Horses were tied to nearby branches, and the campfire was lit. Clara was given a place to sit near the fire, and the young warrior handed her a small piece of bread and some water. She accepted it with trembling hands, her stomach twisting from both hunger and nervousness. The gesture was simple, but it carried more meaning than words could express. For the first time since the raid, Clara felt a small sense of normalcy amid the uncertainty of her situation. The young warrior did not speak, yet his presence communicated more than any words could. He kept a watchful eye on her, scanning the surrounding area for any signs of danger. When Clara looked at him, she saw patience, strength, and a quiet determination. She realized that he was not just a protector. He was someone who understood the delicate balance between strength and compassion. In a way, she felt safer knowing that he was nearby, even if she did not fully understand him or the culture he came from. As the day went on, Clara began to observe the other warriors more closely. They had their own routines, their own ways of moving and communicating, and she started to notice patterns. Some of them were skilled hunters, tracking animals with sharp eyes and swift movements. Others were caretakers, tending to the horses and ensuring the camp remained organized. Clara realized that, despite the initial fear and violence, there was a sense of order and community among them. It was a world she had never seen, yet it intrigued her, and she found herself watching closely, learning silently from her surroundings. The young warrior, whose name she learned was Tasonke, continued to stay close to her. Occasionally, when no one else was looking, he would gesture towards something, a safe path, a place to rest, or a source of food. Clara began to understand his gestures, learning to trust his guidance. She discovered that his silence was not emptiness but thoughtfulness, a careful consideration of every action and word. He communicated in ways that were subtle but powerful, teaching her that words were not always necessary to convey meaning. As the sun began to set, the warriors prepared for the night. They built a larger fire and gathered food for the evening meal. Clara sat quietly, watching the flames dance, feeling both awe and fear. The prairie around them was vast and mysterious, and the shadows seemed to stretch endlessly into the distance. Yet even in the midst of this uncertainty, she felt a strange sense of peace. Tasonke remained near her, his presence steady and unwavering, as if he were a living shield against the unknown. That night, Clara could not sleep easily. She listened to the sounds of the prairie, the rustle of leaves, the distant call of an owl, the soft snort of horses settling in for the night. Her mind wandered to her family, wondering if they were safe, if they were searching for her, or if they even knew where she had been taken. But she also thought of Tasonke and the quiet strength he had shown her throughout the day. Despite the fear, a sense of hope grew inside her. She realized that not everyone in this world sought to harm her. Some, like Tasonke, could be trusted, even in silence. The next morning, the journey resumed. The warriors moved with purpose, navigating the open plains with skill and precision. Clara walked beside Tasonke, feeling more confident with each step. She had learned to read his subtle gestures, to anticipate his guidance, and to trust his quiet decisions. The prairie was still dangerous, still unfamiliar, but she felt more capable now. The fear that had once dominated her thoughts was beginning to give way to a cautious curiosity, a desire to understand the world she had been thrust into. As they traveled, Clara noticed small signs of life around them. Wildflowers blooming in patches of sunlight, rabbits darting through the grass, and the distant flight of birds overhead. She began to appreciate the beauty of the land, even as she remained aware of its dangers. Tasonke occasionally pointed out these small details, helping her see the world through his eyes. In these moments, Clara felt a connection not just to him but to the land itself, a sense of belonging that was both surprising and comforting. Days passed, and the bond between Clara and Tasonke grew stronger. He continued to protect her silently, guiding her through difficult terrain, sharing food when necessary, and keeping her safe from harm. Clara, in turn, began to open her heart to the experience, learning to trust not just Tasonke, but the journey itself. She discovered resilience she had not known she possessed, courage that emerged in the face of fear, and a deepening understanding of the complex world around her. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and painted the sky in shades of orange and purple, Clara sat beside the fire, exhausted but grateful. Tasonke remained close, his eyes scanning the darkness, his presence a constant reassurance. She realized that, despite the hardships, she had found a protector, a guide, and perhaps even a friend in the silent warrior. The journey ahead was still uncertain, but for the first time, Clara felt that she could face it with strength and courage. The night settled over the prairie, quiet except for the soft sounds of the camp. Clara lay down to rest, her mind filled with thoughts of the day and the lessons she had learned. She thought of Tasonke, of his quiet strength, his careful guidance, and the unspoken promise that he had made to keep her safe. In the darkness, she whispered a silent prayer of gratitude, hoping that the journey would continue to bring understanding, safety, and perhaps a glimpse of hope in a world that had once seemed so frightening. The next morning, the sun rose softly over the vast prairie, casting golden light on the tall grass and distant hills. Clara felt the cool breeze on her face as she walked beside Tasonke, who remained silent but vigilant. They were moving deeper into the heart of the land, further away from the settlement that had once been her home. Fear still lingered in Clara's chest, but it was mixed with curiosity. She wanted to understand the people who had captured her and to learn why Tasunke, the silent warrior, seemed to care so much for her safety. As the day wore on, the group approached a large camp nestled near a small river. Horses grazed on the banks, and the sound of running water added a calm note to the otherwise tense atmosphere. Clara noticed tents and lodges arranged carefully, children playing quietly near their parents, and the faint smell of smoke rising from cooking fires. She realized that this was not just a band of warriors, it was a community. People lived, worked, and cared for one another here. The realization both surprised and intrigued her. Tasunke guided Clara through the camp, keeping her close but allowing her just enough space to observe. By someone, she watched as men and women moved with purpose, some caring for horses, others preparing food, and some teaching children how to track animals or make simple tools. The routines were different from what she had known in her settlement, but they had a sense of order and purpose that fascinated her. She could see that each person had a role, and everyone contributed to the life of the camp. Even though she was a stranger, she began to understand that she was entering a world where respect and responsibility mattered more than strength alone. Clara spent much of the day learning quietly. She noticed that Tasunke did not explain things with words, but through his actions she began to understand the culture around her. When a group of children played near the river, he gestured for her to watch. She saw how the adults treated the children with patience, guiding them without anger or harshness. When the warriors practiced riding and hunting, Tasunke made sure she stayed safe, pointing subtly to paths that were more secure. Slowly, Clara realized that this community had a balance between freedom and care, discipline and kindness. As the sun climbed higher, Clara began to ask questions in her soft, hesitant voice. "Why do you protect me?" she whispered to Tasunke as they walked along a trail leading away from the river. He did not answer with words, but stopped and pointed to a small patch of flowers growing wild by the side of the path. He then gently gestured toward her, as if saying that life and kindness could exist even in dangerous circumstances. Clara understood this was his way of showing her that protection and care were choices, not obligations, and that he had chosen to be kind. Clara also began to notice the beauty in the daily life of the tribe. Women moved with grace as they prepared meals over open fires, weaving and sewing with care. Men rode skillfully across the prairie, tracking animals or practicing traditional skills that required strength and precision. Children laughed as they learned from their elders, running and playing in ways that reminded Clara of her own childhood. She realized that the Lakota people were not only warriors, but also teachers, caregivers, and storytellers. Their life was deeply connected to the land, the animals, and each other. During the afternoon, Clara had her first encounter with a tribe elder. The elder was an older woman with gentle eyes and a calm presence. She welcomed Clara with a warm smile, asking her questions about herself in simple words and gestures. Clara struggled to answer, but she appreciated the kindness and patience shown to her. The elder spoke softly to Tasunke, and the young warrior nodded, his face calm but serious. Clara began to understand that Tasunke was respected among the people here, that his silence was not weakness but a sign of wisdom and strength. Over the next few days, Clara slowly adapted to life in the camp. She helped with simple chores, such as gathering firewood or helping prepare food. Each task was small but meaningful, and she began to feel a sense of contribution, even as an outsider. Tasunke remained nearby, guiding her with subtle gestures and quiet warnings whenever danger might be near. She grew more confident in her movements, learning to anticipate his guidance and trust his instincts. The bond between them deepened, formed not through words but through shared experience and mutual understanding. One afternoon, as the sun dipped toward the horizon, Clara was invited to watch a traditional ceremony. She had never seen anything like it before. People gathered in a circle, singing and clapping in rhythm, their faces painted with bright colors, their bodies moving with grace and precision. Tasunke stood beside her, silent as always, but she could feel his calm presence. The ceremony told stories of courage, community, and respect for the land. Clara felt a sense of awe as she watched, realizing that the culture of these people was rich, complex, and beautiful. During the ceremony, Clara noticed how everyone seemed connected, not just to each other, but to the world around them. Birds flew overhead, the river sparkled in the evening light, and the wind carried the music across the plains. She began to understand that this connection was a key part of why Tasunke had chosen to protect her. To him, life was precious, and even strangers could be treated with care and respect. Clara felt a new sense of gratitude, not only for her own survival, but for the chance to witness such a world. As the night fell, Clara lay by the fire, reflecting on everything she had seen and experienced. She thought about her home, her family, and the life she had lost, but she also thought about the lessons she had learned in the past few days. Courage was not always loud or violent. Sometimes it was quiet and patient. Strength was not only in the body, but also in the mind and heart. Trust was earned through action, not just words. She realized that Tasanke embodied all of these qualities, and she felt a deep respect and admiration for him. The next morning, the camp prepared to move again. Clara felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness. She was learning, growing, and adapting, but the journey was far from over. Tasanke stayed close as they traveled, keeping her safe while allowing her to observe and participate in the life around them. She began to notice more subtle details: the way the elders taught the children, the way the warriors communicated silently with each other, the careful balance between work and rest. Each detail was a lesson in understanding and survival. During a break near a small grove of trees, Clara finally found the courage to speak more openly to Tasanke. "I want to understand," she said softly. "I want to know why you are so kind, why you help me when others don't." Tasanke looked at her for a long moment, his dark eyes steady and thoughtful. The gesture spoke more than words ever could. Clara felt a warmth spread through her chest, a reassurance that even in the midst of fear and uncertainty, she was not alone. The journey continued, with Clara learning more each day. She saw how the tribe hunted, prepared food, cared for the young, and respected the land. She began to understand that the Lakota were not only warriors, but also teachers, guides, and guardians of the earth. Each action she witnessed taught her something new about resilience, patience, and the power of community. Taske remained her silent guide, showing her the way not through speech, but through actions and presence. By the end of the week, Clara felt a shift within herself. Fear was still present, but it was no longer overwhelming. She had learned to trust, to observe, and to adapt. She had seen kindness in unexpected places and strength in silence, and she had come to understand that Tasanke's care for her was not a fleeting gesture, but a deliberate choice rooted in wisdom and compassion. That night, as the camp settled under a blanket of stars, Clara lay beside the fire and thought about everything she had experienced. She had been taken from her home, thrust into a world she did not understand, and yet she had survived. She had seen bravery, compassion, and resilience in ways she had never imagined. And through it all, Tasanke had been there, guiding her, protecting her, and teaching her the meaning of trust. Sleep began to take her. Clara whispered a silent prayer of gratitude for her survival, for the lessons she had learned, and for the quiet warrior who had shown her that even in the darkest moments, kindness and courage could exist. She was learning to be strong, to understand, and to see the world in a way she never could have imagined. The sun rose slowly over the prairie, casting a soft orange glow across the hills and grasslands. Clara felt the cool morning breeze on her face as she walked beside Tasanke, who remained as silent and watchful as always. The camp had moved deeper into the plains, and the sense of calm they had felt in the previous days had begun to shift. Clara could sense it before anyone spoke. Tension was in the air. The warriors were quieter than usual, their eyes scanning the horizon, their movements sharper and more deliberate. Something was coming. As the day unfolded, Clara saw the reason for the unease. A distant cloud of dust rose from the horizon, moving rapidly toward the camp. She squinted, trying to make out what it could be. The other warriors immediately recognized the threat. They began to prepare, checking weapons, securing horses, and positioning themselves strategically around the camp. Clara's heart pounded in her chest. She had never seen the Lakota respond to danger in this way, so fast, so organized, so controlled. It was a side of Tasanke and his people she had not witnessed before, and it both frightened and fascinated her. Tasanke stayed close to Clara, guiding her gently but firmly to a safe spot behind a large rock near the edge of the camp. She clutched the satchel of belongings she had brought with her, her stomach twisting with fear. She wanted to run, to hide, but she trusted Tasanke's guidance. He had never let her down before. His dark eyes scanned the horizon, watching the approaching threat with calm determination. Clara realized that he had already thought of a plan, though she could not see it yet. The riders approached the camp. Clara saw them now clearly, another group of warriors moving quickly and aggressively. They were larger in number, and their intentions seemed dangerous. The Lakota warriors formed a defensive line, positioning themselves strategically around the camp. Clara's fear grew, but she also saw a new side of Tasanke. He moved with precision, his body language commanding respect. He directed others with subtle gestures, never raising his voice, yet his instructions were understood perfectly. Clara felt awe mixed with relief. She was safe with him near. The rival group came closer, their horses thundering across the plain. The Lakota warriors met them with calm strength, blocking their path and standing firm. Clara could see the tension in the air, the careful balance between attack and defense. She noticed how Tasunke never acted recklessly. He stayed close to the younger and weaker members of the camp, ensuring they were safe while the warriors handled the confrontation. His eyes met hers briefly, and though he said nothing, she understood the message. "Trust me, you are safe now." She had seen warriors before, but never like this. Tasunke and the others moved with precision and courage, protecting not just themselves but their entire community. Each movement was calculated, each action purposeful. Clara realized that bravery was not just about fighting. It was about protecting, leading, and staying calm in the face of danger. Her admiration for Taskang grew stronger with every passing moment. The rival group attempted to push forward, but the Lakota held their ground. Clara saw how they used strategy rather than sheer force, working together to block and redirect the attackers. Tasunke's role became clear to her. He was not only a protector but also a leader, guiding others silently, anticipating threats before they happened, and ensuring that everyone was safe. Clara felt a mix of fear and respect. She had never met someone who could be so strong, so quiet, and so caring at the same time. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, the tension reached its peak. The rival group tried to break through the defenses, but the Lakota warriors under Tasunke's subtle guidance stood firm. Clara realized that their strength came not just from weapons or skill, but from unity, trust, and careful planning. She began to understand the deeper lessons Tasunke had been teaching her all along. Courage was not loud, kindness was not weak, and strength came from protecting others, not just oneself. At one point, a young warrior near Clara stumbled as he tried to move into position. A rider from the rival group noticed him and charged. Without hesitation, Tasunke moved like lightning. He positioned himself between the young warrior and the attacker, using his horse and body to shield the boy. The moment was brief but powerful. Clara held her breath, watching the silent warrior protect someone else with fearless calm. When the danger passed, Tasunke looked at her, and again she felt the silent reassurance in his gaze. "You are safe now." Clara remained hidden behind the rock, observing carefully. She saw the warriors work together, communicate silently, and protect every member of their community. Each time she thought the rival group might succeed, Tasunke found a way to guide others, redirect the attackers, or create a safe path for the children and elders. Clara realized that the strength of the Lakota was not in violence, but in care, strategy, and unity. She began to see the warrior not just as a protector, but as someone who carried the weight of responsibility for everyone around him. By late afternoon, the rival group began to retreat. The Lakota had held their ground, protected their people, and ensured that no one was seriously harmed. Clara felt a rush of relief, mixed with awe and gratitude. She had witnessed courage and wisdom in action, and she understood why Tasunke had earned the respect of everyone in the camp. He was a silent leader, strong and thoughtful, fearless and kind. She could not help but feel a deep admiration for him, and a sense of safety that she had never known before. After the danger had passed, Tasunke returned to Clara. He guided her through the camp, checking to make sure she was unharmed. She felt a mixture of exhaustion and relief, her body tired from the stress, and her mind racing from what she had witnessed. Tasunke did not speak, but his calm presence communicated everything she needed to know. She was safe, and he would continue to protect her no matter what challenges lay ahead. That evening, as the camp settled and the sun set in brilliant shades of orange and purple, Clara reflected on the day. She thought about the fear she had felt, the danger that had threatened them, and the courage she had seen in Tasunke and the other warriors. She realized that bravery was not only about fighting, it was about protecting others, staying calm under pressure, and making thoughtful decisions in the face of uncertainty. Sitting near the fire, Clara watched Tasunke quietly assist others, making sure everyone had water, checking on the young and the elderly, and moving silently but effectively. She understood now why he had been so protective of her from the start. His strength was not just physical but moral and emotional. He carried responsibility for the safety of those around him, and he had chosen to include her in that care. Clara felt a new sense of respect and trust, not only for him but for the community that had shown her courage, compassion, and unity. That night, as the stars filled the sky and the prairie was quiet once more, Clara lay near the fire, thinking about the lessons she had learned. She had been terrified in the morning, but she had seen courage in action and learned that True strength was often quiet, thoughtful, and protective. She whispered a silent thank you to Tasky for keeping her safe and for showing her what bravery really meant. She felt a deep sense of gratitude, not only for her own survival, but for the opportunity to witness courage and compassion in their purest forms. As she drifted towards sleep, Clara realized something important. The world was larger and more complex than she had ever imagined. Danger existed, but so did protection, kindness, and wisdom. She was no longer just a frightened girl from a small settlement. She was learning to understand courage, trust, and the strength that came from caring for others. And by her side, always silent but always present, Tasunka remained a constant reminder that even in the darkest moments, safety, guidance, and hope could be found in the most unexpected places. The morning air was crisp and quiet as Clara woke in the camp. The previous days had been filled with uncertainty, fear, and danger, yet something had shifted within her. She felt stronger, more aware, and more connected to the people around her. The sun rose slowly over the horizon, painting the prairie in gold and soft pinks. Clara stretched, her muscles sore from the long journey, but her heart felt lighter than it had in weeks. She glanced at Taske, who was already awake, standing silently near the edge of the camp, his eyes scanning the horizon as always. Today would be different. The elders had gathered the camp early, speaking with serious but calm voices. Clara did not understand all their words, but she could sense their purpose. The warriors, including Tasunke, moved with quiet efficiency, preparing for something that she knew was important. She watched as families packed belongings, children were guided by their parents, and the camp took on a sense of movement and purpose. There was no fear in the air, only careful preparation. Clara felt a mixture of nervousness and curiosity. Whatever was about to happen, she knew it would mark a turning point in her journey. As the morning wore on, Clara learned that the elders had negotiated a safe passage for her return to her home settlement. She felt a rush of mixed emotions. Relief, because she would finally see her family again. Fear, because leaving the safety of the camp meant stepping back into the unknown. And gratitude, because she had learned so much from the people who had protected her. Tasunke remained near her side, his dark eyes steady and calm, his presence comforting. She did not need words from him to understand that he would ensure her safe return. The journey back to her settlement was quiet but tense. The warriors formed a protective group around Clara and her small belongings, moving with care to avoid any danger along the prairie. Clara walked beside Taske, feeling a strange mixture of comfort and sadness. She had grown attached to the camp, to the people who had shown her kindness, and especially to the silent warrior who had protected her. She realized how much she had learned from them: patience, courage, trust, and the importance of protecting others. Each step toward home was filled with reflection as Clara thought about how much her life had changed in such a short time. Along the way, Clara noticed small signs of life she had not paid attention to before. The gentle sway of the grass in the wind, the chirping of birds in the distance, and the quiet murmur of a distant river. She felt a new connection to the land, a sense that life was both fragile and resilient, and that every moment carried meaning. Tasunka occasionally gestured toward these signs, silently teaching her to observe, respect, and appreciate the world around her. Clara realized that this journey had not only been about survival, but also about understanding life in a deeper, more thoughtful way. As they neared her settlement, Clara's heart began to race. She could see the familiar outlines of her home in the distance, the small cabins and fences she had known all her life. Memories of her parents, her friends, and the routines of her former life filled her mind. Yet, she also carried the lessons of the prairie, the wisdom of the elders, and the quiet strength of Tasunke. She understood now that returning home would not mean forgetting the journey she had taken. It would mean carrying it with her, using it to grow stronger, wiser, and more compassionate. When Clara finally arrived at her homestead, her parents rushed to greet her. Tears flowed freely as they embraced her, holding her tightly as if to make up for the time they had lost. Clara felt a mix of relief, joy, and lingering fear. She knew her family would worry about her every day, but she also felt a newfound sense of resilience. She had survived unimaginable challenges, learned to trust in the strength and kindness of others, and discovered courage within herself that she had never known existed. After the initial reunion, Clara found a quiet moment to reflect. She thought about the Lakota camp, the elders, the warriors, and especially Tasunke. She realized that he had taught her lessons that words alone could not convey, lessons about bravery, compassion, patience, and trust. She remembered the way he had silently guided her through danger, protected her from harm, and shown her the meaning of true courage. Even though he had spoken very little, his actions had spoken volumes. Clara understood that his presence in her life had been a gift, one that would shape her for years to come. Over the next few days, Clara slowly reintegrated into her former life. She helped her parents with chores, tended to the animals, and returned to familiar routines. Yet, everything felt different. She had seen another world, learned a new way of looking at life, and understood that strength and kindness were not always loud or obvious. She carried the lessons of the prairie in her heart, and with each passing day she shared them subtly with her family and neighbors. Clara's experiences had changed her, making her more aware, more thoughtful, and more courageous. Clara often found herself thinking about Tasuke. She wondered if he was still in the camp, teaching, protecting, and guiding others as he had guided her. She remembered the moments when he had silently reassured her, kept her safe, and shown her the meaning of trust. Though she had returned home, a part of her remained with the prairie, with the camp, and with the silent warrior who had left a permanent mark on her life. She knew she would never forget him, nor the lessons he had taught her through his actions, his patience, and his unwavering care. One evening, as Clara watched the sunset from the porch of her home, she reflected on her journey. She thought about the fear she had felt during the raid, the uncertainty of the journey through the prairie, and the courage she had witnessed in Tasuke and the Lakota warriors. She realized that life was unpredictable and sometimes frightening, but that courage, kindness, and trust could be found even in the darkest moments. Clara understood that her experience had given her a new perspective on life, one that would guide her decisions, relationships, and understanding of the world for the rest of her days. Clara also reflected on the importance of community. She realized that the Lakota camp had thrived not just because of individual bravery, but because of unity, care, and shared responsibility. Everyone had a role, everyone looked out for each other, and each person's strength contributed to the safety and well-being of the group. Clara understood that this lesson applied not only to survival on the prairie, but also to life in her own settlement. She began to see ways she could contribute, help, and protect others, inspired by what she had witnessed. As days turned into weeks, Clara felt a sense of peace. She had returned to her home, reunited with her family, and resumed her life, yet she carried with her the wisdom and strength she had gained on the journey. She often thought about Tasuke and the silent lessons he had taught her. She understood that courage was not always loud, strength was not always visible, and kindness could change lives in ways words never could. Clara had grown into someone stronger, wiser, and more compassionate, ready to face the future with confidence. In the quiet moments of the evening, Clara would sometimes close her eyes and remember the prairie, the endless grass, the flowing rivers, the songs of the birds, and the watchful eyes of Tasuke. She felt gratitude for the lessons she had learned, for the protection she had received, and for the courage she had discovered within herself. Her journey had not only ensured her survival, but had also given her a deeper understanding of life, humanity, and the power of trust and care. Clara knew that she would never forget the silent warrior who had guided her, protected her, and shown her the true meaning of courage. Though their paths had diverged, the lessons he had taught her would remain forever. She felt a quiet determination to live her life in a way that honored those lessons, to be brave in the face of fear, kind in the face of uncertainty, and strong in the face of challenges. She understood now that life's trials could reveal hidden strengths, unexpected allies, and the profound impact of quiet courage. As the stars appeared in the night sky, Clara whispered a final silent prayer of gratitude. She gave thanks for her safety, for her family, and for the lessons she had learned. She thought of Tasuke, the Lakota camp, and the journey that had changed her life forever. Though she had returned to her home, a part of her would always remain on the prairie, carrying the wisdom, courage, and compassion she had witnessed. And in that quiet moment, Clara felt a deep sense of peace, knowing that she was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, guided by the lessons of the past and the strength she had discovered within herself.